I hereby call to order this Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, March 11th, 2024. The time is 8:01 a.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Aaron Stone.
Here.
John Caesarretti. Ann Hart.
Here.
Bonnie Kim.
Here.
Allison Paplas.
Here.
Amy Paling.
Here.
Lisa Schneider-Fabes.
Here.
I seek a motion to approve the minutes of the February 12th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting.
I move to approve the minutes of the February 12th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting.
May I have a second?
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Board members, are there any comments, errors, or omissions to the minutes? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ann Hart.
Yes.
Bonnie Kim.
Yes.
Allison Paplas.
Yes.
Amy Paling.
Yes.
Lisa Schneider-Fabes.
Yes.
Aaron Stone.
Yes. Motion carries. We will begin with facility development. Mrs. Kim.
Thank you. Mr. Baltimore will provide information regarding summer 2025 construction plans.
All right. So as we start to think ahead to summer 25, at least in the time that I've been here, we've typically waited until May or June. I think even one year we waited till August to get design authority from the board to start having the architects and engineers work on it. But then thinking about what we're going to consider and what's in front of us, the primary project for 25 would be to add air conditioning to the remaining 12 or 13 classrooms on the first floor at the junior high. And then thinking about how the last couple of summers has kind of drug out with chillers and electrical gear, to the point where, this upcoming spring break will be a pretty busy work week for the construction team. Got us thinking, if we could get the board to approve design authority, the design team could start working on that. With the goal of, speeding up the process and getting to the point, potentially 2, 3, 4 months earlier where they could identify what equipment would be appropriate, and then we could pre-purchase, ultimately hoping that by the time school would start in August of 2025, that particular project could be done. And the construction team was all for it when I reached out to them. Joe said that right now chillers are about a 31-week lead time, but I think right now the longer lead time, at least when we've seen, is a lot of the electrical switch gear, and every time we've done, except for one, I think the electrical gear has had the much longer lead time, and at least in this case has been the last things to arrive. So if the board would be willing to approve, I believe the engineers would start over spring break, start getting into the junior high and start really getting their hands dirty with the design. I did leave a one-page handout for everybody. That is our 5-year capital project summary from December. I just wanted to have everybody, as you were thinking about whether you wanted to approve this, if you go to the very bottom row, that junior high AC project, was on there, and that's our priority project. Of all the things that we have as we wind down the kind of a 5 to 6 year look at what projects we want to do, that we've previously talked about quite a bit in public, was first floor AC at the junior high, and then followed by replacing the windows at the junior high. So those were kind of the last two of things that we've, I think, been very public that hey, we're going to do these, and these are on our list. Everything after that is still, kind of to be determined. We'll talk about that probably in 2 or 3 months about what we want to start to prioritize after that. But I guess where I'm at, I don't see anything changing in the next 3 months that would change my mind that first floor AC project would be our priority. So if that's the case, I thought let's get the design process going.
Well, any questions about that? Makes good sense to me. Ann?
Thanks, Cory. So,
Yep.
just want to make sure I'm looking at this correctly. So the design approval is the 439.
That's on this sheet, that right now, the estimate that we had from Nicholas 2 years ago for this project was 2.9 million. Couple things to keep in mind. You're probably looking at 4 or 5% inflation, each year that number is old. But the other part of that is like when Joe is estimating some of these projects, he's doing so without much design work at all, and it's very, very high level and pretty conservative. So the way I think of it is, yeah, the number that we have as a placeholder is roughly 2.9, but realistically, this is a project that's probably in the upper 2s, or with some inflation, potentially just slightly over 3. That's kind of how I'm looking at that.
Okay, so that's the
That's
combination
like
of
the hard cost. The design cost is what the architects and engineers would start to incur. And so we pay 8% of like the construction costs as architects and engineering fees. And so in a case like this, if we were to say, yes, go ahead and start designing, and we get, all the way to the end, and then we change our mind, we would, still be on the hook because they've incurred a lot of cost. And when I think about their fee, probably 75 to 80% of it is kind of locked in before the projects are actually going on site. So,
So the two numbers in the bottom row,
yeah,
the total of those, is that just for the AC?
yes.
Or, okay, and the windows that are further out
Yeah.
are not? or
So if
they're-
you go up to the top half of that page,
Yep.
the windows
Oh, I
have their,
see,
yeah.
I see, yep, okay, great.
I was just going to say, I appreciate you thinking forward and differently about this, and this is something we've relatively committed to, and I like the idea of getting ahead of the materials and the planning.
I also really appreciate the foresight, and I support this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corey.
That's all we have.
That's all we have for facilities. So you have what you need from us?
Yep, absolutely. I
Okay,
just
all right.
I think our process in the past has always been, before we're going to put the district on the hook, we get the board's approval to incur those costs.
Right. We are moving on with School Finance Committee. Mr. Cesaretti is not here. I think I'm turning this over to Mr. Boltemeyer again for student fee review.
That's right, and we have a lot to review. Corey has put together a really thorough presentation. Hopefully everyone has had a few moments to think a little bit about the many different ways in which we're going to examine fees.
Yep.
Corey?
All right, so for the documents that each of the board members have in front of you, there's a couple of reference documents in addition. The bottom of the pile that I left was the slides. So the first, I think, 3 pages is our fee summary sheet. The reason I included that is it has 10 years of history. So as I'm talking about them, putting 10 years of history in that document's a lot easier than throwing it in the slides. So feel free to look at that. That's would apply to all of them. Then I have a more detailed financial information summary sheet for both lunch program and transportation. And it's got both of those have 10 plus years of history. So feel free to reference back and forth between the slides. A good bit of the information on those is in the slides, but similarly, it would be nearly impossible to put all that info into the slide. So as Dr. Krimascoli mentioned, we will be talking about a lot of different fees. So as I go through, if the board wants me to stop at the end of each one to talk about it, I'm fine with that. Or if you'd like me to go all the way through, and then we can, work our way back through with board direction after that, I'm okay with either option. Just as I'm going, feel free to jump in if you want to do the first option.
I'm thinking maybe we do a slight pause after each one
Sure.
just to see if anybody has anything, and if not, we just roll forward.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, so our first fee, our instructional materials fee. one thing to keep in mind, as I put together some of the options for board to consider, these options are a combination of past board direction to administration, past practice, also, trying to create some options that have some rationale and support behind them. So as we dive into instructional materials, we talked about last year, we raised the fee based upon the applicable CPI. So starting on the left-hand side, I have the current year fee for each grade level. The third column shows what the fee would be if we increased it by the applicable CPI for next school year, which is 6.5%. Then you see the fourth column is what the fee would increase for each student. And then the secondary option for this, which is something that as I was diving in, kind of getting to my attention. So at the bottom, I've got a note that, the 5th through 8th graders, going back several years, they had each seen a year where their fee went up exactly $50 related to some iPad cost for insurance for repair replacement. And as Tony has shared with me, 5th through 8th graders were the first grade levels to get that 1-to-1. And then later on, we did the same thing for the 1st through 4th graders. Well, in looking back, we had not taken that step to add the $50 to their fee. And so I wanted to present that as an option, and then you see that in the top half. So what that 5th column is for the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grades. That would represent a 6.5% for the CPI plus 50 for the iPad, which we had previously done for the 5th through 8th graders, and then you can see the difference. And then one other note I have here is sometimes information gets lost, and thankfully we were able to find it in previous notes. So like one might wonder, well, what's the difference between 1st, 2nd, 4th versus 3rd? 3rd grade has $6 for a recorder, which the students don't get in the other 3 grades. And then for 7th grade, being a little bit more than the 8th grade, it's meant to cover the cost of a lock-in, a uniform for PE. So those are the difference if someone were to look and say, well, why are these just slightly different? There is some rhyme or reason behind that.
Board members, sorry, any discussion or questions about this one? Amy?
Remind me, for the 5th through 8th grade, the iPad fee is a one-time fee or a yearly fee?
Well,
It was, so the history was we had a lot of different flavors and options back when we started the program, too many. Rent to own, bring your own, provided, and then there was this optional insurance, so then the families would pay the deductible. Well, since then, we made a move to roll that cost, it was when Ellen was here, into the instructional material fee, because kids using an iPad is not a separate program that kids can opt in or opt out. It's just how we do business in D39. So that fee was then rolled into the instructional material fee. So when we went to the elementary, it was every year, by the way. When we moved to the 1 through 4th grade, that was in 2019, 1 year right before the pandemic. And I think it probably either got lost or, and I'm not sure even if it was brought up, there was a desire at that point in the middle of the pandemic to probably increase the fee $50, even if it was brought up. But it was never rolled into the instructional material fee like it was 5 through. Okay, that's the history. That's helpful.
Lisa?
No, I just want to, and we're adding
1-4.
and 1 for yeah, disconnect. We have policy.
Anyone else? So we're good with this fee as is, or as proposed, I should say.
I'll make one other note, just for those who might be wondering. In kindergarten, we do have iPads within classrooms. They're not allocated to students in the same way. They stay primarily in the school. They're kind of a classroom set, so we don't initiate that fee until 1st grade. Is that accurate, Tony?
Yeah, they're cart-based devices, as kindergarten's just a different animal, more social opportunity.
Yes. Right,
So I just, when we're saying what we're saying yes to.
Yes.
that's what I'm saying yes.
okay. Anybody else? All right, I think we're moving on to instrumental music.
Okay, so the second option with the $50.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Again, we're reviewing these today to get feedback, input, questions, discussion, and then it will come back at the board meeting for
Approving
final approval.
next Monday, right, yeah.
Okay. Oh, there we go. All right, so the next fee to consider, instrumental music fee. So when I looked at this, this particular fee, just a couple of thoughts. This fee has remained the same for 7 straight years. And then I dug into the cost side, and really what you're looking at is a combination of teacher overload, so staff working above a 1.0 FTE, so taking just that overload amount for those particular staff, plus the budget that's in place for purchase services, supplies and materials, some travel, joining, participating in events and competitions, and looking at that fee relative to where we are. And we were a little bit short. So in reference, like what's the overall cost? It's about 131,000 roughly is the total cost of this. And I looked at what we've collected so far for our fees through the month of February. And I guess where I'm at is if we were to apply that same CPI factor to this particular fee, that would, for next year, should get that fee, the assuming participation's the same or relatively the same, should be relatively close to each other. So that was the kind of the proposal in the background for there. And then even before that, as far as I could dig back, like the fee had been held steady for at least a half dozen years. So it's not like there's been a lot over the last, say, dozen years. There hasn't really been much in the way of movement for that, for those fees. Any questions?
Board members, anything on this? Okay. So I think we're moving on to the lunch fee.
Yep. All right, lunch program.
Wait. Sorry, thank you for helping with that. So, yes, so we're good with this, the instrumental music fee. Yes, thank you for helping me with that.
All right, lunch program. All right, so I know we've had conversations about this a few different times the last few years. So our first, our slide here, this is one of the ones where you have that full page of reference information that goes back, I think, 10 or 12 years. So our top row, right, we were looking at what is our lunch price, and then for the fiscal year 23, what was our actual deficit, which is 301,000, and that was roughly 81.8%. Then we increased the lunch fee for the current school year, and the amount that is there, the 322,000, that's based on the budget, and it would hold us, relatively flat as far as percent covered. But I do have a note at the bottom. Leading into this, I was looking at it and saying, okay, well, what's kind of the most optimistic or rosy picture I could see happening as we wind down the year on the expenditure and the revenue side? And I ended up with about $175,000 deficit for the program. And then on the kind of the worst case, from what I'm seeing right now, something in that 325,000. So I guess the takeaway I have from that is the most likely scenario is probably something that ends up with a deficit in the 200,000s. And then when you look at it on a percentage basis, that shows some improvement, right? Like we had this fee increase with the goal to have a higher percent covered. The most likely scenario is that when fiscal year 24 ends, that percent covered by fees will be higher. Probably something in the 80s. Where it lands in the 80s is to be determined. So then we started thinking about, well, what do we know about the upcoming school year. Due to settled contracts, we know what the staffing costs are going to increase. So we're able to estimate that. We have a fairly good handle on what the larger benefits, which is the insurance, might cost for next year. And then less certain, put in an estimate for what the supply cost might increase. And then looked at, okay, well, if we're trying to make some progress, what are some options that we might come up with? So we have three options here: a 5%, a 9.5%, and a 14% increase to the lunch fee. And the second column from the right, where I have the estimated surplus, that's really just starting with fiscal year 24 budget numbers. So I think for me, I focus less on what that deficit number might be if we choose an option, and more on how much does the deficit change in relation to the budgeted deficit for fiscal year 24. So, kind of the thinking on the high end was wanting to create an option that kept the all of the lunch fees below $6, and then trying to, knowing on the low end that some of our costs, like the raises and the insurance, are likely to be roughly 5% for next year.
All right, board members' comments about this one. Lisa?
So, we have our philosophy, we're overarching. And this one doesn't fit squarely into that philosophy, right, of individual benefits and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering what we think of that.
I was wondering the same. I mean, I have an opinion, but I'd like to hear from other board members. I think first. Amy?
So I agree. I think, we've, in my mind, moving toward the full coverage would be ideal. I like option 2 because it gets us closer, and maybe we could consider that again next year. I'm wary of doing anything too abrupt, like I think the 14% may potentially change the user, how much, I don't know. I guess I'm inclined toward option 2, where it gets us closer to the users covering more of it without a shock to the system. But so I would be hesitant to do option 1, because I think we need to get closer to them covering it. But I'd be open to option 3, but inclined to option 2, where it feels maybe a bit safer that we're not going to lose users, but I'm eager to hear what other people think.
Other board members?
So if you're eager to, I think that the biggest jump is from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, it's less. Right, if you're just looking at a daily lunch, and I worry, like, of all the inflationary items, food has increased the most. And I also know that we are going to be asking staff to make some special lunches and kind of really, I don't know, I'm okay with 3 or 2, but I think we're talking a small, we're talking change when it comes to the difference between the 2. What do other people think?
Anyone else?
So when I look at this one, this one truly, in my mind, is optional. I think transportation, that's a little bit trickier based on, schedules and when people need to be out of the house. But with the lunch, I do feel like, families truly have an option to send the lunch. I do agree with the staffing costs, with the new contract, with supply costs, that it needs to go up. And I was in the 9.5% range as well. But when I look at the dollar amount between option 2 and option 3, I don't know, I would have to think about that. I feel like that is a really significant jump from the 2023 amount to the 2024-25 amount to ask of families. So I would need to think through that. I think I was most comfortable with option 2 initially.
Okay, Bonnie?
Yes, so just for clarity, when we're talking about food costs, we're not talking about supervision, right?
There's no supervision in this.
Right, so that's, I mean, so when we look at those numbers, I mean, it's, well,
Strictly
It
the
is
cost
strictly
of
food.
providing food to a child during the school day.
yeah, and so when I mean, I like option 2 a lot because it, you know, it speaks to the increase in costs, but yet is not so severe. I mean, I'd probably be one of those people that would say about the $5.96. Well, that sounds like $6. Is that a lot, you know? And so, I don't know. Those are my initial thoughts.
Okay.
But option 2 looks really good to me.
I waffle between 2 and 3. Without a strong preference towards either one. I think in my mind, I'd be in favor of option 2 with the thinking that in a year we increase it again. I think would be kind of where I'm at.
I think I'm with you too, Erin. I think I would be okay with option 3. I do think the sticker shock might be a little
Yeah.
bit hard to take. But I agree with Ann that I think there is a really good option for families to bring lunch from home.
Yep. So I think if we're talking about philosophy, increasing it, I think goes along with, I think, what we're thinking about that. Like, this is optional. Yeah. Okay. So,
And so the direction it sounds like people are leaning toward would be option 2 to bring forward for approval at the upcoming board meeting. Is that true, or am I jumping ahead of where we're at?
is that where we're at?
I'm okay with that too.
I think part of it, Lisa, to answer in my mind is like, we're doing increases everywhere and we need to, that's appropriate and necessary, but that's part of why I'm feeling like, okay, maybe option 2, and then with the knowledge that next year we'll have to pay attention and do the same thing. If this were in isolation as an increase, I think I'd be more likely to go for option 3. At least that's why I'm fine that way.
Okay.
Is it true, though, to Lisa's point, that the board's desire is to continue to move toward families paying the cost of this food provision for their children? So we're continuing to move in that direction, but the board's inclination right now is to take incremental steps towards that. Is that true?
That's true for me.
That's true for me. Okay.
Thank you. That direction
Yep.
is really, really helpful.
Okay. All right.
All right.
I just one more thing.
Yeah, say whatever you like.
Thanks. I appreciate all the permutations of information, 10 years, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, you know, when you think about the lunch, you know, the board approves option 2, then we start to talk about this at some point next year. We'll have known for fiscal year 24 exactly. I think where we're trending with selecting option 2 is that you're seeing progress towards what that ultimate goal is. So it's not like we're just like, made progress and then stop,
Right.
So, all right, transportation. All right, so a few different slides here. This is probably the biggest thing for consideration. So the last couple of years, we have increased the fee, relatively speaking, those have been percentage-wise larger increases. So what I wanted to show here is, and it also was very helpful to me as I was thinking about like the direction and what we should try and accomplish going into the next school year. So 21-22, I think we had the fee level for a few years. You see our rate of ridership just barely over 1,000. We did a bigger increase. Ridership, the compositions can jump around between one way and round trip. Then we were at 1,027. So then We looked at it again, jumped it up for 23, 24. And, one of the things that can be challenging when we look at transportation and see that like our percent covered is, only in the 60s, and we know where we ultimately want to go is, well, at some point, what impacts ridership? From what we're seeing here, right, we've done a couple of increases. Ridership hasn't gone down, actually gone up. The one thing I would point out is, for the first time, the Park District had asked us, could we transport some Central students over to the Lakeview Center for an aftercare program? So there was 24 kids transported directly only in the afternoon. That is new. Presumably those kids hadn't necessarily been bus riders before, or maybe they participated in some kind of other after-school programming or activities. So to me, that accounts for at least a little bit of the increase. But I think it does give a good reference point of what we've done in the past and how it's impacted ridership.
Corey, just to be clear, the Lakeview Center is within the central residency zone.
Yeah.
And families participating in that transportation pay for that one-way transportation in
Right.
the afternoon. So it is essentially just routing a bus to a new location within their residency zone.
Very similar to,
Like, is
Yes.
everybody's internet down? Or is it just me and Amy?
Mine's on.
Amy and, yeah, me too.
Oh, well, let's pause for just a moment while
let's-
we get ourselves situated here. Thank you.
I mean, I don't care, but I mean, I just figured, it looked like Anne's having trouble too, so board wide.
It's enough of us.
For those who might be online with us, we are paused for just a moment. We're having some technical difficulties for a few board members' laptops.
Is there anyone, who else still needs help?
I think it's just, Ann, you're good? I think it's just Lisa.
Okay, great. CJ. It'll be more than a few.
That works. For anyone watching again from home, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. We're working our way through that. We will reinitiate our discussion here in just a minute. Thank you.
All right, I think
Talk
we're,
about transportation
Yep.
fees.
Okay, so we have our ridership and relative to our fees in front of us. All right, so then the next step was, in light of the options that I've going to be sharing with the board here in a second, thought it was useful to kind of take a look at what some of our neighboring New Trier community districts have as far as their fees. So you see Winnetka up top. They've been a good bit higher than us for a while, and smaller increase for next year. Then we go to the second row with Glencoe, a little bit more of a sizable increase for next year, particularly in their one-way, jumping that up $250. Avoca's fee we just have for the current year, they're still kind of considering everything, what they might want to do for next year. And then I've also listed the New Trier High School District with both of their one-way and their round trip fees being a good bit above of D39's current fees. So then that gets us to, what are we looking at right now? Where are we at? So for the most recent year that we completed, the actual percent covered by expenditure, by percentage of expenditures covered by fees is just 62.5%. Then when we look at where we're at for fees, where we think the regular transportation cost will end for the year, and then the fees we've collected thus far, we're looking at about 64%. And that's keeping in mind that we have, had some double-digit fee increases the last couple of years. So we've got three options down below: a 10%, a 15%, and then a 20% increase to the fee that we charge D39 students. I have estimated what the percent on the far right column might be. On the expenditure side of the equation, that assumes a 5% cost increase. I have not received a firm renewal yet from North Shore, but in some preliminary conversations, the increase I've been promised would be in the single digits. So I've just estimated 5% to give us, a starting point of what things might look like for next year. And then at the very bottom of this slide, similar to what we've done in the last few years, is just to give everyone a frame of reference of, if we had really taken steps even beyond the options we're considering, what might the fees have to look like at current ridership levels to hit 80% covered by fees, or 90%, or even 100. You're seeing, a dollar shy of $1,300 for a round trip if we were truly trying to cover 100% of our cost. So I have all the fees the fees for next year laid out there. As I think about it, of all the different fees that we're considering today, this is probably the one that I probably feel the most strongly about, where, trying to tackle a much higher increase, it would be something that I lean towards. Just because when I look at where we're at, and if our goal is to try and make progress and get someday to 100% of this program being covered by fees, we've taken some steps on the fee side. Ridership has remained the same. There's really two ways we could someday get to that 100% number: keep raising the fee and hope the ridership stays the same, or do something on the cost side. And the reality is, on the cost side, the only way you would really achieve anything substantial would be to eliminate routes. And I haven't dug deep into that, but the preliminary looks that I've had, you would probably go down the road of some kind of mileage threshold, and to hit any kind of mileage threshold that would move the needle on this, you start to look at it would be substantial. And so you find yourself in, okay, well, large fee increase or going this other route. I realize none are ideal, but that's kind of why I'm leaning towards one of the larger increases for next year. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Board members?
I have a question. I should be able to do the math myself, but what do you think this comes out to? I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm just curious, what are we talking about?
So right now, our current fee, if you do round trip, is $4.50 a day,
Sorry,
$4.50 a day,
Round trip.
round trip.
I mean, I hear you, Lori, about increasing the fees, and I think that when I remember how hard it's been to keep good bus drivers and keep that transportation, and our costs have increased, and $4.50 a day. And so what would we'd be talking per day if we went to the option option 2 or 3?
Yeah, so if we did option 3, where it was $950 round trip for the year, you're at $5.40 a day.
It feels, right, when we think about what public transportation costs, right, on the metro, on the bus, it feels in line. And then the other piece, I don't know that this is a relevant data point, right, but New Trier's cost is charging $1,800 a year just for parking, right, which that was a sticker shock to me. But I don't know, it feels like you're asking families who live less than a mile away to be subsidizing those who are on the bus, and it feels reasonable anyway. And when you talk about price per day, it's probably pennies if you're comparing options to, I don't know what other people think.
Other board members? Ann?
Just a couple of questions. So looking at ridership from 2022, 23 to this year, so we are down a little under 10%, right? From last year, am I reading that correctly? From the round trip riders went from 792 to 717. And, you know, and the fare increase was $100. So I'm just wondering if we continue to go up. I think you've, you know, considered that and factored it in, how many more riders we're going to lose. Because we're potentially discussing taking it up $100 or more again. And so I just want to, you know, make sure that that is built into the projections based on what we saw this year. Would we continue to see a ridership decline going forward? I thought it was very helpful to see the other districts in New Trier and Winnetka, and especially considering the size of Winnetka versus Wilmette, the fees there. And I guess, you know, I'm just trying to understand, are we changing our philosophy? We've been right around that 60 to 65% in terms of expenses covered by fees. And are we saying that we want to change that? And if so, why?
Bonnie?
So I'm going back to the sheet that Corey provided, and looking at the 2012, 2013 numbers. And at that point, the fees covered 78% of transportation costs. And, you know, coming to where we are now at 61%, I mean, that's a significant shift. Yeah, so that was
I'll
relevant.
just add, because ridership is something we're really thinking a lot about. Although the round trip riders decreased, our total riders actually increased. And so I'm wondering if maybe families just made some choices about how they were spending their time transporting children. So we actually saw a pretty significant increase in our one-way riders, both in the AM and the PM, relatively speaking, in that same comparative year. So just another note, and that's something that I think we're thinking a lot about. We do have to think about ridership and how to maintain the program if in fact the board wishes to maintain it. There are some routes that are more utilized than others. There are some distances that seem a little more reasonable to transport by bus than others. Currently, the board makes available transportation to anyone who wants to register for it, regardless of distance from school. So some of those things are things that we're thinking about. But it is a good point to note that there was a shift in ridership in our round trip and in the one-way from year to year.
Sure.
Thank you.
And potentially some families, when they saw the increase, said, okay, we'll have to make a choice. We're not going to do this both ways. Which way is, you know, most important given our schedules and constraints?
Right.
Tim?
Anyone else?
I think somebody over here.
Well, I
Amy.
think to Bonnie's point, looking back, and my recollection of our board's conversations, that philosophically we do want optional programs to be covered more by the user. And so personally, I am interested in the 15 or 20% options, just because we're trying to live up to that and to know that it is an option. We want to continue to provide it. We want to be cognizant of ridership, but currently we're subsidizing more than we'd like. So to ultimately get to that goal, I think option one would be hard. We're just getting further away.
Anyone else? Allison?
I agree with that. I think, though, that option 3 to 20%, again, the sticker shock of that is pretty eye-popping, I guess. And I think if we did go that route, we'd have to explain it in a way that's pretty clear to parents and other folks about the increase. I'm not sure that everybody knows that we subsidize. And so when they see the increase, I just don't want them to be, I don't know, confused about our intentions.
I think that's true for either. I think the communication piece will be huge.
Yeah, and I think that's true for all of these fees. I
Right.
think it needs to be explained in a way that's really clear. I think last year there was a little bit of maybe not enough explanation, or maybe people didn't read it carefully enough, but I think that's a really important piece.
Can I add to that?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
to Lisa's point, I mean, it's, when you look at lunch and you're looking at like $5 a day, that's much more, like, that's a number that you can wrap your head around. And when you look at transportation costs on a daily basis rather than an annual fee, and you can see the increase, I think that that's probably a little bit more like palatable, or it makes more sense to look at it that way. I mean, that's how I would.
And the other thing to remember, right, is we've had real cost increases in the
Yeah.
price of transportation. It's not like we're doing random, oh, well, let's just increase the cost to increase the percentage. These are real increases, and thank God we had the foresight to do what we needed to do to keep the bus drivers here, right? CPS can't even get enough bus drivers to provide transportation to its students. And so us providing increased costs to the companies, like paying more, has resulted in our ability to keep the service going.
I think about option 3, the percent covered by the fees is still less than the percent that we're covering, or the percent covered by fees for the lunch. And philosophically, to me, that makes sense because we're providing a convenience in both cases. But if I think about it philosophically, the bus seems like more of a necessity for families than the at-school lunch. So to me, the option 3 lines up with, of the transportation lines up with where we are on option 2 on the lunch. And also, to Mrs. Kim's point, getting us to where we used to be as far as what percent we're covering.
I had one
Oh,
more.
yeah, go ahead.
We took the price down of the KEEP program,
Yep.
right? And that has consequences. So I just wanna, I'll go with whatever the group thinks, but I do wanna say this is on my mind.
Yep.
Mine as well.
So I think I don't currently have a sense of which option. I mean, we've talked about option 3, but is that kind of where we're at?
I have one other question.
Yes, go ahead.
I know for the lunches, we sort of talked about a progressive
Yep.
move up. Are we talking about that with this as well? Or, I mean, depending, I suppose, on what option we go with. But if we went with 3, do we intend to increase it again next year to get to some certain percent?
Do board members have an opinion on that at this point?
I'll keep going.
Yep.
I think that's our philosophy, and yes.
Yeah.
Whether we chose option 2 or 3, I think that's the way we head, understanding that Corey's projecting a 5% increase, right? And there's no reason to think, given the cost of fuel and providing buses, it's
Yeah, to me, it just comes, the biggest piece of that is what expenses we're seeing next year.
But in addition to like a CPI adjustment? Yeah, okay.
a straw poll.
Yeah. Which option are we thinking if we want to just go around?
I'm good with 3.
Okay,
3.
3.
I'm okay with 3. I agree after listening to discussion. I'm
Okay.
okay with option, I'd support option 3.
Okay, Allison?
Yeah, I can do option 3.
Okay.
I think with Allison's point about finding a way to really explain to families that the district that taxpayers are subsidizing this to a, you know, certain percentage, and our goal is to have more of the ridership.
And that we're sort of getting back to the percentage where we were even
Yes.
before.
Yep.
I think
And
that's
it's-
helpful.
Along those lines, I recall last year getting the email to register and with the information. And I think I recall separately seeing a description, some rationale behind the fees. Is there any chance that when you get that initial email that we can outline, you know, why the change, how much is covered, subsidized?
So the information, what you're requesting is that that information be included in the location, the communication about registering for transportation and selecting lunches, all of that. There should be something that indicates, maybe even there, this figure represents riders covering this percentage of the cost for transportation. The board subsidizes the remaining portion or something like that. Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I think you're right. I think our communication went out in an email, in a newsletter, and then it was separately requested that families sign up for transportation. So thank you, Anne. That's a really, really good point, and we will take that under advisement.
Okay. So
All
I
right.
think we're ready for the athletic
Yep,
fees.
yep, last fee on the table for today. All right, so the first slide, I have some history of what so the athletics, it's one that's been targeted to be break even. So I have some history of where we're at. Finished fiscal year 23 with just, a deficit of barely over 2,000. Taking a look at where we're at this year, seeing a deficit maybe in that $7,000 to $13,000 range. I think in any given year, once you start to get that deficit, a good bit below 10,000, whether you end up with negative or if you add a year that you were positive, you're really starting to talk about, how full is each team. Some of these fees are a few $100s. Take basketball or something. If you had a couple open spots on a team versus years that you have full. So you're really then talking about things that are, just a little more random versus like larger structural things. So then as I think about, what are we facing with the small deficit that we're at, with the most recent implementation of the WA contract, the coaching stipends by and large had a 4% increase for this current school year. And so when I was looking at, what I thought, made some good sense going into next year was proposing a 4% increase in each of the sports fees. Kind of the coaching, when I look at the cost of everything, whether it's refs or the small supplies or materials they need, by and large, the coaching stipends make up an overwhelming majority of it. So we're looking at a potential 4% increase for the upcoming school year to try and have that deficit be, as close to zero as possible, depending upon participation.
Board members, any comments or questions about this one?
I'm okay with this. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're good.
Thank you. All right. That is all I have related to finance.
All right, thank you very much. I think we're ready to move on to strategy. Mrs. Schneider-Fabes.
Who am I turning it over to, Dr. Kromascoli?
To me, actually, I'm going to give a quick update to the board and our community regarding our joint culture and climate leadership team. So we'll see if I'm able to successfully share my screen and talk just a little bit about this important strategy that we're implementing at this point. So we have this year formed a joint culture and climate leadership team. I want to update the board about that and then also share just a little bit about the upcoming survey that families will be hearing about. Our staff and our students will also be participating in this survey. So this is our joint leadership team members here. This team is somewhat unique in that we have really made a conscious effort to ensure that we have representation of every employee group participating in this culture and climate leadership team. including our support staff union members, our WEA, or our teachers union members, and administration as well. We also have representation from each of our 6 schools and from the central office too. The goal really is to have this team help lead the effort in evaluating our culture across the district and making some recommendations for action steps moving forward. So we've started some collaborative work, and we started the year in November with this team after doing our recruitment. We did an introduction and then have been doing several training sessions with our partner at the National School Climate Organization. Right now, we're currently in our survey administration, so I'm going to share just a little bit about the work that we've been doing together. This is the National School Climate Center. They have been our partner in helping to lead this joint leadership team as we have been progressing through. They really focus nationwide on measuring and improving the climate for learning in schools. And so we're really happy to have them as our partner to help us learn about school climate and also about potentials for improving that. We've learned so far about their improvement process, which starts with preparation, then moves into evaluation, which is the phase that we're in now, action planning, implementation, and then reevaluation. We see this as a cycle of improvement and will be ongoing over the next several years, but certainly an important aspect of our work. And this is in support of, within our strategic plan, we're supporting goals 2 and 3. 4 as well, but we really know that school climate has an impact on student achievement as well. And so we recognize that really in each of our goal areas, we're hoping to have an impact. So we spent some time learning about school climate. School climate really refers to the quality and character of school life. Research shows that how students feel about being in school shapes their learning and development, and that school personnel are better able to do their jobs when in healthy and supportive school climate. So our team has spent some time with the National School Climate Center learning about school climate and its impact on achievement as well as on the work of each and every one of our employees. We've also spent some time in our sessions examining how we can enhance our efforts for school climate readiness. So not only do we want to gather information, but we really want to learn about how to make sure that the information we're gathering is representative of what's happening within our schools. So we spent some time really exploring how to cultivate that sense of commitment to school climate and making sure that as we communicate this upcoming survey opportunity, that staff members, students, and families know about this effort and are ready and hopefully willing to contribute to the information we're gathering that will inform our action plans. So we're now moving into measuring school climate. We have a survey that is being launched this week. We've spent a lot of time looking at survey outreach and communication strategies, making sure that we are reaching out to diverse stakeholders, that we're educating everyone about the importance of measuring school climate, and really just orchestrating that effective survey outreach campaign. So again, our partners have spent a lot of time talking with our joint leadership team about these strategies, and we are just now in the process of implementing that. We're administering the Comprehensive School Climate Inventory Survey this year. That will go to staff and to students. We're hoping to get nearly 100% of staff, and for our students, it's students in grades 3 through 8 who will be participating in this survey, again, across the entire district. All parents are encouraged to participate in this survey as well, and parents can fill out one survey for each student that they have enrolled in the district. And so that's something that we're really emphasizing with them as well. Again, all 6 schools are participating. So the CSCI wanted to share just a little bit about this new survey tool because, again, it is new for us this year. It's a school climate survey for students, staff, and families. We will be taking it instead of the 5 essential survey. So the board will remember ISB supports the 5 essential survey as the primary tool for school climate, but also makes available these other options. And after doing a pretty thorough review our team decided on CSCI. It's valid and reliable. It provides an in-depth profile of our school communities, our strengths, as well as areas for focus. It will give us a needs assessment. And again, it's developed and supported by our partners at the National School Climate Center, who are helping to facilitate and professionally develop our joint leadership team. Oops, I can't see my, there we go. What does the CSCI measure? It measures 5 dimensions and a variety of areas within each dimension. So you can see here which areas are being evaluated. We're looking at school safety, we're looking at teaching and learning, interpersonal relationships, institutional environment, and leadership and efficacy. In each of these areas, there will be questions for students, for staff, and for our families as well. When asked the question of why take a school climate assessment, there's a variety of reasons, but for us, it's really important that all stakeholders have a voice in school improvement. So we want to celebrate our strengths, we want to identify areas for targeted improvement, and really look at real data to measure the environment of all of our schools. So we know that in order to make meaningful change, it is essential to understand the experiences of all those within our community, and we're hoping that the school climate assessment will help us to elevate the voices of all stakeholders so that we can really inform the work that is ahead of us. Some differences from the CSCI to the 5 essentials, and some of the reasons we really went with the CSCI. First of all, it is student-centered. We know that all of the work that we do within District 39 focuses on our students, and so we wanted to take that student-centered approach to this evaluation as well. So when we're asking our staff, when we're asking our students, when we're asking families about the experiences within schools, we are not only asking about what's happening for our students, but what's happening for our staff and our families relative to the student experience. We're, again, including all staff. It is really, one of the reasons we liked CSCI is that the questions are clear and simple. They're really connected to the work within our schools. What we found with 5 essentials is that occasionally the questions were a little more complex, a little more challenging for some of our staff to answer and to really see their work within the 5 essentials. The same is true for our students. Often we would hear from our students that they weren't quite sure either what the question was asking or how it related to the work that they were doing in our schools. And so we wanted to make sure that in order for this tool to be, and the information to be valid and reliable, that the questions were easily understood by all. So we see it as a better match for our schools' focus and for the work of our schools. The data will be more actionable. Often, as we evaluated what we were hearing back from the 5 essentials, we weren't always sure how to actionize that data. And so this will help as we move forward with the joint leadership team. We can disaggregate the data by subgroups. Also, the opportunity for some to answer that it's not applicable or does not apply is really important as well. What we heard previously is people weren't feeling like the question related to the work that they were doing, or students didn't see themselves in that question, and yet they were forced to answer the question. And so that was uncomfortable for people as well. So again, we want to make sure that everyone feels like they can engage in the survey, can provide us with really valuable information about their experiences within our schools. And again, it's all confidential. We will be monitoring the response rate for our students and for our staff, as well as for our families. But the responses are individually confidential. So that hopefully, again, will encourage everyone to participate and be as honest as possible. Over the next 2 weeks leading up to spring break, our students, staff, and families will have the opportunity to take the CSCI. And the question is always, how will the data be used? So our joint leadership team will first have the opportunity to receive the data and evaluate the data district-wide, but we'll also be working to analyze and evaluate that data on a school level. So we are planning to work together to analyze the data from the survey responses, to identify areas for celebration as well as for improvement. We're going to be using past information and really comparing that to the new information that we're receiving from CSCI. So we've already taken some time to really dig into the 5 essentials and some of the other data that we have gathered regarding culture and climate. And so we're seeing this as an opportunity to triangulate that data and really inform some of our next steps. The team will help us to identify some action steps based on the survey results, and then each school will also receive their results so that they can, within their school, evaluate and identify some areas of celebration as well as opportunities for growth. We intend to share the survey data with staff, with our community. The board will receive a presentation just as they have in the past regarding the results and what we learned from that. That's just a quick update. We're really excited about our Joint Culture and Climate Leadership team. This group has been really wonderful and probably called upon a little more than they had anticipated when we first launched the team, largely because we have been working with our partner at the National School Climate Center, and they've provided us with some really great training. And so I'm thankful for everyone's participation in this, and we're excited about the work that is ahead. As you receive the CSCI, the prompts, the links, please take the time to fill out that survey. It's really important and will help our joint leadership team to make some decisions, to celebrate, and to plan for next steps. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding any of this brief update here.
Do you have any idea of how long the survey is? Is this like a 5-minute survey or a?
Yeah, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete the survey, so it's a little bit longer. We're hoping that people will have the stamina for that kind of length of a survey. But again, the questions are relatively easy to answer, but do take some thought. Mm-hmm. Yes.
We received it, right? We got in the last,
I
because I think
think-
I took it. right?
Did you already take it? Maybe if you
Unless there was
took
a-
it, it was just over the weekend. I
Yeah,
think you've
okay.
received some prompts so far. Yes.
I would
perfect.
say it's less than that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
It's very doable. I was just making sure I didn't take a different survey, but I took that, and it was, it's so manageable. And it does feel like the questions are applicable, and if not, I liked the not applicable option. I think it really felt comprehensive and interesting, and like really exciting to see the results after having seen the questions.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah.
And I should mention too that New Trier also uses the same survey tool. And so we're seeing it as, again, a partnership where we'll be able to consider each other's data and kind of what that tells us. Some of our other elementary neighbors are also using the CSCI this year. So yes, thank you. Yeah.
I think it's very exciting. And along those lines, when do we expect to hear about some of the results and action steps coming out of it?
Yeah, so the team will meet again in April. We actually have a half-day session where we'll be receiving those data and really digging into those. We don't expect an update to the board and the community until at least the end of the year, and possibly as we look toward August and starting to establish the action steps for the upcoming school year. Thank you.
All right, thank you. This would be an opportunity for the public to address the board. I do not see any public here, so we will move on to old business. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Having no further business, we need a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole meeting.
I move to adjourn the committee of the whole meeting.
I need a second.
Second.
Motion having been made and seconded, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ann Hart,
Yes, here.
Bonnie Kim,
Yes.
Allison Pathless,
Yes.
Amy Paling,
Yes.
Lisa Schneider Fapes,
Yes.
Aaron Stone.
Yes. Motion carries, and we are adjourned, and the time is 9:15 a.m.